and I grew some from seed a couple of years ago called the Hi, it's Steph, and it is July and my coneflowers are in full bloom, so I thought that we would go through and take a look at some of the things that are blooming in mid-July. We'll start here on my patio bed, and the first thing that I'm really excited about is these firelight tidbits that I planted last July are starting to bud up and will bloom for me this season. You can see there are a good amount of bloom buds on each of these. Each year, these should get better and better, and they're a dwarf hydrangea, staying only about 2 to 3 feet tall and wide. It's also a panicle, so they bloom a lot later than the macrophylla type hydrangeas, which are blooming beautifully this year. They're having a banner year. We had a mild winter, lots of rain, so all of the blue hydrangeas are looking stunning. As we come over this way, my lavender is just about done blooming now. I have a variety of lavender called Munstead English lavender, and I did start it from seed, and it's been here for 3 or 4 years, and it's done fairly well. And this bed does retain a lot of moisture, so my only guess as to why it has done well here is because it's an English variety. And in England, they get a lot of rain, so it could be a little more adaptable to a little bit of moisture. But now that one is almost done, and I have some yarrow that I'm yet to plant. Now this variety, I don't know the name of it. It was just labeled as yarrow, but it is very similar to a kind that I had last year called Tutti Frutti Apricot Delight that didn't return in this bed. I actually have just a little bit right here that I just spotted. But the clump got much smaller again because of the little bit of moisture that this bed holds on to. But it is a beautiful yarrow, and even this one being very similar, you can see the different color changes that it goes through. It starts a darker kind of salmon, and then it will fade to this really pretty apricot, which complements these coneflowers so nicely. This variety here is the double scoop raspberry, and you can see that the double scoop varieties usually have this puff on top with the petals that kind of hang downward. And I really love the color of that coneflower. We'll go around the corner here and then we'll take a look at some more coneflower varieties. And in this corner, I have a drift of some hyssop. This is the Golden Jubilee, and the pollinators absolutely love it. There are bees on here constantly. And I started these from seed using the winter sowing method. And they have these really pretty sprays of purple spike type blooms and this bright chartreuse foliage that really pops in this corner. These are all grown from seed, so you can see that growing from seed is a really affordable way to grow your landscape and to have drifts of plants, large groupings. And on this side, I'm going to show you some more coneflowers. So I have a couple of varieties here and a couple which were grown from seed. So this here is the traditional Echinacea purpurea, which is the native purple coneflower. And you can see that this clump has gotten larger and larger. And right here in front of this group of Echinacea purpurea, I have this really beautiful purple plant called Stokesia aster. And you can see how pretty these are. They're a really kind of frilly, light lavender purple bloom. And they bloom right around the time that my coneflowers bloom. And they're looking really pretty. I also have some red hot poker. Now this variety is called Lady Luck, and it's a really pretty chartreuse color. You can see that it's just getting ready to open up, and there are a bunch more buds poking through. So this is currently getting ready to show off. And even when Nophophia or red hot poker is not in bloom, you get a really pretty clump of foliage that almost looks like an ornamental grass. Well, it has been 2 days since I filmed my garden tour, and while I was editing, I noticed that my Nophophia was looking absolutely beautiful. Now, most commonly you will see the Nophophia or the red hot poker in shades of orange with a little bit of yellow. And this variety that I have here is called Lady Luck, and it's a really pretty kind of chartreuse limey green that tapers off to a cream. And I really love this variety. I actually purchased it on Etsy, of all places. Sometimes you can find some pretty unique varieties of plants on Etsy, and you can see all of the bloom spikes that are still left to come up and bloom on this plant. And these 3 were the first to bloom. So I wanted to make sure to include this in my July garden tour because I really love these. Again, this is the Lady Luck variety of Nephophia. I also noticed that my Supreme Cantaloupe coneflower has bloomed. Now this is a really beautiful coneflower, one of my favorites, but I almost lost it and I actually had to dig it up and plant it in this pot to keep it a little bit drier over the winter because we had had really wet weather last fall, winter, and spring, and I have lost a few coneflowers in this bed because it holds on to a lot of moisture, and this one was almost on its way out, but I'm happy to see that it survived, and even though it's a lot smaller, I did get a bloom, and there's another one here. So I'm going to find a little bit drier spot to plant it, maybe even on the edge of this bed where it stays a little bit more dry, and kind of mound it up a bit because I really love this beautiful coneflower. Now all I did to protect this over the winter was keep it in this pot here, and I stuck it in the corner by my foundation where it would still get watered, but it was in a microclimate, and I mounded up the pot with a few leaves and it survived, which was wonderful. I was really happy to see it pushing out some growth this spring. And the green twister echinacea that I started from seed is also starting to bloom. This is a really pretty coneflower. It has a pink, kind of like the traditional Echinacea purpurea, pink purple color closer to the cone. And then the outer tips of the petals are a green, like a lime chartreuse green. I have another one here behind my Stokes aster. Look at that. They're so pretty. And I noticed that here in between my clump of the Stokes aster, I have some Echinacea or coneflower bubblegum. And this is a double scoop variety. And this is another one that is also struggling, similar to the Supreme Cantaloupe, where every year the clump has gotten smaller and smaller. I actually didn't even know it was here. I just noticed it between all of the aster. But I have about 3 blooms, and there's maybe another bud back there. But if there's one thing that coneflower really prefers, it is a full sun location with a very well draining soil. It is quite drought tolerant once it gets established. I also often get questions about whether or not the deer and rabbits eat my coneflowers, and I think that the deer mostly stay away from them. They are listed as resistant, but I have found a couple of buds on the ground, and a couple of bloom heads. So I do think that the bunnies do really like the coneflowers. It's just that I'm really on top of spraying this time of year, and this is what I use, the Liquid Fence deer and rabbit repellent. And I think that really helps keep my flowers intact. And these coneflowers here are the Pow Wow Wildberry, and you can see how pretty this pink is. It's a really vibrant, hot pink. And these are all going to start blooming. These have spread quite a bit here in my garden. I have some here, some over by the fountain, and those just popped up there. So you can see that they will drop seed and they will start growing new echinacea plants everywhere, which is always a lot of fun. And here is one that just popped up in this bed. I have a little bit of white in here and mixed in with my Echinacea purpurea. And I grew some from seed a couple of years ago called the White Swan Echinacea. And even though I didn't plant any white swan in this bed, because I have some in my front borders, I think the birds drop the seeds, the wind will bring the seeds. And look, we got a little group of some white coneflowers, which I thought was a really fun find this year. My baby Joe Pieweed has really put on some height, and it is starting to bud up. Now these were some plants that I added last year for some late summer interest. So the Joe Pieweed will probably start blooming towards the end of July, beginning of August. And I also have some Chalone, which is just starting to really put on some size, that I had planted here underneath the corner of this Japanese maple, but it was getting hidden. So I went ahead and just shifted it over there. So this bed is looking really great, and I have a bunch of zinnias and Verbena bonariensis that I tucked in the center there that are really going to look pretty as the summer goes on and the coneflowers start to die back. Those will pick up the color show in this bed. All right, let's move on to some of the front borders. And an update on this container, which is looking so pretty. I really love this combination this year. The orange sun patience with this blue lobelia and some coleus, and then I did tuck in some Boston fern. And then the creeping Jenny in the front with the yellow. I'm just really happy with the way that it turned out. And when I pull into the driveway to get into the garage and I look at it, it just makes me really happy. And while I never really use orange colors, I think this orange with this blue was just a really great combination this year that I'm really pleased with. And right here on my driveway bed, which I like to call my retaining wall bed for obvious reasons, right? There's a wall here. I have some plantings, and I have a group of 5 Bobo hydrangeas planted here. And with the amount of rain that we had this year, it really helped these hydrangeas load up with blooms. You can see how many buds are on these, and I think they're going to look lovely this year. This is also a pretty compact hydrangea, the Bobo, staying anywhere between 3 to 5 feet tall and wide. It's also a panicle variety, which can handle more sun. This is actually a full sun spot, and as long as they get plenty of water, they do really well with having a lot of beautiful white blooms. And planted right behind them, so as you come down the wall, I tried to make sure that I had plantings on both sides that were pleasing to look at, and that the taller things were in the center, such as the Bobo. So right behind them, I have some liatris. And you can see that the liatris is already starting to bloom. They bloom from the top down. And I have a few groupings of these coming down the wall as well. This one is a little further ahead. And you can see how pretty of a combination it makes with the liatris and the Bobo hydrangeas. And here on the front side of the wall, you can see again this drift of the Bobo hydrangeas looking really beautiful. I have some alliums here that are starting to get budded up and will be blooming in the next several weeks. This variety is called Lavender Bubbles, and it has a really pretty kind of blue-gray foliage, and then we'll get these little round sphere-shaped or ball-shaped blooms of purple flowers. I have a couple of varieties of this allium in my garden. I have the Lavender Bubbles, and I also have Millennium, and they bloom slightly off from each other. So the Millennium will bloom first, and then the Lavender Bubbles will bloom second. My Olivia Rose Austin has continued to produce blooms. It had a really good flush in June, and you can see that it's got lots of buds and will continue to bloom throughout the season. It needs a little bit of deadheading, but this is a really great David Austin for me in my garden. It's really the only one that does fairly well, planted out in the landscape. All the others are in planters. And in this area here, I have some plants that I grew from seed. I have the Dalmatian Peach Foxglove, which you can see have just really pretty foliage at the moment. They should be a first-year bloomer, so I am waiting to get some blooms on these. I'm hoping that we will see some this summer. But I interplanted it with some Blue Horizon Ageratum, and you can see how pretty that is looking. And the pollinators love it. So I think that the purple Ageratum with the apricot color of the Dalmatian Peach Foxglove will make for a really beautiful combination. And this bed should look really pretty in a couple of weeks. I also have some of the Casablanca lilies. They are some oriental lilies. They're really tall, really big, beautiful, large white bloom that will also bloom probably towards the end of July, beginning of August. And right around that time is also when the Rudbeckia that I have in this bed will start blooming. Okay, let's go ahead and check out the main walkway bed. And right here in the corner of my main walkway bed, last year I planted this Carly Rose fountain grass, and you can see that it already sent up its pinkish toned blooms, and it's looking really pretty. The blooms on grasses are these fuzzy plumes that you see here. I really love the texture of this grass with the background of these evergreens. This here is a gold mop cypress that I did shape up into a small topiary tree, and right behind it I have a evergreen called a Hinoki cypress that has gotten really large, and I really love it as a backdrop to the corner of this bed. Now this main walkway bed is in a little bit of a lull at the moment. But there are a couple of things that I'm going to point out to you. I had to clean up all my knockout roses. They had their first big flush. The leaves got infested by a sawtooth larva. So I did clean a lot of that up, and they are starting to reload and put out some new foliage. So I'll show you that. But I have some daisies in the back that are blooming and looking really lovely. And my coneflowers. So I started some coneflowers from seed, the White Swan Echinacea. I've talked about this a couple of times in the recent videos that they were supposed to be all white. And this year I had a little bit of a reversion to some of this purple, which is the original cultivar, the Echinacea purpurea. And I did some research, and apparently that can happen, that after a couple of years, they can go back to the original plant. So that has happened here, but they still look really pretty together. And so I'm just going to let this clump go, and yeah, and we'll see how it turns out over the next several years. Maybe the whole thing will be purple by next year. We'll have to wait and see. But the other thing that is looking pretty good right now is my gomphrena that I started from seed. If you've been around the channel for a little while, you know that in the last couple of years, this is probably the third year that I've grown gomphrena, I like to make a border all along my front walkway with this annual. Now, gomphrena is amazing. It's also known as globe amaranth. It is drought resistant. The deer and the rabbit don't touch it, and I hardly have to water it at all. It gets watered by the rain, and that's it. And so by the end of the season, these will overhang this walkway and look absolutely stunning. The first year I grew the atomic purple. Last year I grew a variety called Snow White, and this year I'm back to the atomic purple because I really loved the color. I think that it really popped on this walkway. Because we're set back from the street, the brighter color really made more of an impact. Here is some more of the white swan coneflowers. The pollinators love these. There are always bees all over them. Now, I've said this before, but coneflowers are one of my favorite flowers. They just last for a really long time. So even when they're done blooming, you can keep the cones up, and they provide a little bit of architectural kind of structure in the garden. And the finches love the seeds, so you can leave them up for the pollinators. But look how large this one is. So gorgeous. Now, some of these coneflowers get pretty tall, so I have had to support them with some plant stakes, because over the last couple of years, when I didn't do that, they would end up getting hit by the wind and falling all over the walkway and looking pretty messy. But this year, I got to it early with some of these half circle stakes, and they're working really well to keep these nice and upright. My front porch pots are picking up. You can see here that my mandevilla. I had overwintered this mandevilla, and it is really starting to put on some blooms now, which is really great. And even this Silver Falls dichondra that I divided, I had one, I divided it into two, and you can see that they're really picking up now in both planters. The purple fountain grass is really filling out, and even some of the things that I planted from seed, like right here, I have some of the raspberry ripple, Sahara raspberry ripple zinnias that are starting to bloom. And I also started some nasturtiums from seed. This is the Tip Top Pink Blush. And look how pretty these are. They're like a light yellow with a little bit of a blush tint. Now, nasturtiums don't like it when it is too hot, so I'm not sure that these will do very well over the summer, but if they can hold on, they will look really lovely towards the end of the summer, beginning of the fall, once the temperatures cool off. And some vinca filling in with some lantana. So all in all, I'm really happy with this combination of planters. Most of it was grown from seed. Here, my friend Maureen shared some of her red flint ageratum with me. I tucked a little vinca in there. She also shared some of her geraniums that she grew from seed. And these were some of my Black Devil pansies that I grew from seed that are still holding on, even though pansies also like cooler temps. So really happy with the way the front porch pots are looking at this point in the season. And here in this border, I also have something else that I grew from seed, and it is this beautiful plant. This is the Sahara Rudbeckia. And you get so many different colors from just one plant. It has these really gorgeous kind of sunset colors. This one here has kind of a burnt orange. This one is a little past its prime now, but it almost has a little bit of a mauve appearance. But I am loving these. I think they're so pretty, and they're starting to bloom around the same time that some of my Rudbeckia is opening. Now, Rudbeckia is a great mid to late summer plant. Some varieties even will bloom late summer into fall. And in the past, I haven't really loved this golden yellow color, but I've really started to come around to it last season. And I think it looks particularly beautiful with this light purple of the Blue Fortune Agastache. This one is a little bit behind, but once we get to the other side of the bed, I'm going to show you another one that I have that is a little bit more in bloom. I had to cut back this phlox. This was the fashionably early crystal, which bloomed earlier, But now I have another variety of phlox right behind it that is loading up and getting ready to bloom. Now, I don't know the variety of that one because it was given to me by my sister-in-law. So it's just like an old-fashioned garden phlox, but it has a really pretty kind of light pink lavender color. In the back of this bed, the rose campion is now pretty much done blooming, so I'll have to go in there and clean those up. My coneflowers and daisies are also interplanted in the back here, and you can see I have some lilies. The lilies are all budded up. I have a clematis that's kind of growing in and through the lilies. And I even have some verbascum in the back that was grown from seed. The white verbascum with a little bit of a purple center. And here is the other Blue Fortune agastache or agastache. You can see how large this one is. I believe this one might get a little bit more sun. And right here is a large group of the rudbeckia. So once this yellow rudbeckia is blooming with this light purple color, it makes for a really beautiful color combination. And some more Echinacea purpurea. You can see that this clump has also gotten pretty large, and it is now growing into our fire glow Japanese maple. My raised bed garden is really filling up with flowers at this point. All of the dahlias have started to grow. The cosmos are all loaded and getting ready to bloom, and it is just looking so lush and green in there. And even this new bed that we just planted up, the cleome is starting to bloom, and all of these flowers here, a lot of my daisies just bloomed. The orangium or sea holly is loading up, the bee balm, and I'm just really loving this area. When I look at it from the window and I see all of these new beds with the dark fence and the lush greenery, it just really makes me happy. And as you come up from our raised bed garden, you enter our Japanese maple garden. And I was looking at some footage from just a couple of months ago when this area was still bare and dormant from winter. And the contrast is just so sharp from what it looks like now when it is nice and lush and everything is blooming. Well, I should say everything looks colorful because there's not a whole lot of blooming going on in this area, which I actually really like because I have a lot of color in this space just through the use of texture and foliage, which this is a different type of gardening than I've done in the past because most of my garden is sun. And this area is turning into a shade garden, which has been a really nice change. And I've really enjoyed pairing plants in this area. But my little lime hydrangeas, this hedge I have here of 3 little limes, you can see that even in the last month since we worked on this patio project, that they've put on a good amount of height and the blooms are now loading. And this is one of my favorite stages of this hydrangea. Actually, I'm lying. I like all of the stages. But this one in particular, I really love the way that it starts to load with these really tight kind of lime looking buds. I just think it's really beautiful. So these will start to open up and then they will look like a limey color and then they will turn a beautiful creamy white. And then as the summer kind of tapers off and we have cooler nights, they start to turn pink and then finally end in all shades of mauve and like tans, cream, gorgeous as we head into the fall. So as you can see, I really love this hedge of the little lime hydrangeas. My planters are doing really well. The mandevilla in my window boxes, while they are pretty budded, they still haven't bloomed very well. So I would say that overwintering mandevilla, just as in my first experience a couple of years ago, it just takes them a long time to get going. So I don't know that it's worth the effort to try to keep them alive over the winter if you're not going to get blooms until mid to late summer. So that is how I feel on the overwintering mandevilla, to give you an update on that. But the mizu, which is a new to me annual, is really filling out beautifully and doing well, kind of growing together with this creeping Jenny. These pots are also looking great. This is the colocasia or the elephant ears, the dark one that I had purchased at Lowe's last year. I was able to save the corm or the bulb, and I had 2 of them, so I have 1 in each pot. And this latte petunia is also doing really well. It has really filled out. This is 1 plant, and look how large it has gotten. It has pretty much filled up the whole container all the way around. The elephant ear on this side is quite large. Look at that. They have really pretty heart-shaped leaves. And I really prefer the dark colored ones to the green ones. And my summerific hibiscus. This is the Proven Winners Perfect Storm Hardy Hibiscus. It is a perennial hibiscus. They do take a little bit of time to break dormancy in the spring, so a lot of times people will think that their hibiscus didn't come back. That is completely normal, but they also get really large. This is probably the third or fourth season in this space, and it will get full size this year at about maybe 5 feet tall and 4 to 5 feet wide. It fills up this whole corner, and it will get these really large dinner plate sized blooms in light pink with a red eye. They have a really tropical vibe to them, so if you plant them somewhere by a patio or a pool, they look really beautiful. They're a great plant for your mid to late summer garden because when other things start to kind of die back, these will show up, and they're really eye-catching. You come down our driveway and they really catch your attention. So I really love this plant. And I have some Verbena bonariensis kind of just planted in the center there. So that is going to be the only other flower that I have that sort of blooms until the fall, where this Sheffield mum will pick up. But in the back, you cannot miss that beautiful hydrangea that I have planted there. Now we're going to go around the corner and I'm going to show it to you. Now this is a Proven Winners Quickfire hydrangea. It is a panicle hydrangea, but it has more of an open bloom structure. And it gets really large at 6 to 8 feet tall and wide. And when I first told George that, he was worried about how big it would get. And it has gotten quite large, but he really likes this hydrangea and he thinks it's beautiful as well. It starts off this creamy white color and then it will deepen to a deep pink, almost red color in probably another month or so. And it is just really pretty. Nice and upright. You can see that even though it's a fairly large hydrangea with these big bloom heads, these stems are really nice and sturdy. And I have some of this plant here, the astilbe, that is pretty much finished blooming now. I do have some in the center that should be blooming in the next couple of weeks. But this is also another really beautiful shade plant with some ferny foliage and these really fuzzy, colorful blooms. And that actually brings us to the end of the July garden tour. I just wanted to make sure to document some of these plants. It's really difficult to time garden tours because you always want to wait for that next pretty plant to bloom to include it. But I just wanted to kind of take a snapshot of my garden in mid-July. So thank you so much for spending your time with me, and I will catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, please hit the thumbs up button. And please consider subscribing so you don't miss any of my future videos. And we'll see you soon.